August 1. This is show number 2.
7 seconds to go in the Super Bowl. Steelers lead 16-6. They're on the way off the field, and it's all over. The Pittsburgh Steelers, with the 16-6 victory over the Minnesota Vikings, they have won Super Bowl IX and are world champions of professional football. On January 12, 1975, the Pittsburgh Steelers won Super Bowl IX with a 16-6 victory over the Minnesota Vikings. Millions of Americans only remember those 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon and the 16-6 Pittsburgh victory. But to the thousands of writers and players and people from the NFL and others who are associated with the game in New Orleans, the Super Bowl was much more than a game. It was the culmination of an incredible week of parties, press conferences, and related activities. This is Jim Miller, and in the next few minutes, we hope to tell you about Super Bowl week 1975. This is New Orleans, Louisiana, known as the Crescent City, located on the banks of the Mississippi River. Between January 5th and January 12th of 1975, New Orleans was also the site of the parties, press conferences, and other activities leading up to Super Bowl IX. New Orleans and Super Bowl week fit together perfectly. While thousands of visiting reporters, celebrities, and fans were enjoying the fine restaurants, the French Quarter, the excitement of Bourbon Street, and the sound of New Orleans jazz, the city itself became totally immersed in the events leading to Super Sunday. Planning for Super Bowl week starts a full year in advance, and the week itself begins with the arrival of the first reporters on Sunday, January 5th, 1 week before the game. The Marriott Hotel serves as press headquarters and the base of operations for most journalists. The empty press room where stories and columns are written would soon be filling up quickly as more than 1,600 accredited journalists would descend on New Orleans by kickoff time. Upon arrival, all reporters register in the Press Information Center adjacent to the press room where, throughout the week, daily press releases, bus and transportation schedules, and other information on press activities would be posted and handed out. Media members receive an unmatched information kit, including brochures on the two teams, on past championship games and Super Bowls, as well as an outline of all the week's activities and parties. Don Weiss, the NFL's Director of Public Relations, describes the league's approach to the press.
We try to anticipate what a writer needs, what a television reporter needs, what a cameraman needs, what a photographer needs, what a radio man needs. And we try to maybe think of that before he runs into it and comes to us and says, gee, I'd like to have this. So basically what we're doing is setting up as much services to him to make his job as comfortable as possible.
The first scheduled activity of Super Bowl week is a Monday morning visit to Tulane Stadium for the Pittsburgh Steelers Photo Day, which provides reporters their only opportunity during the week to photograph and interview players while in uniform. Many of the Steelers took the occasion to take some photos of their own.
I'll just camera down with me. This is the first time I'm ever using a 35 millimeter. It's today. I don't know basically what I'm doing, but hey, you know, we have a great team, and I want to take some pictures and have some memories of them too.
Two Steeler rookies gave initial reactions to being at the Super Bowl and were asked if there was any extra pressure for this game.
The only difference is all the newspaper reporters and stuff like that, you know. But, you know, last night was our first night here, and we just kind of enjoyed being in New Orleans. So, you know, as of right now, we don't feel too much pressure, but I'm sure as the week goes on, we will.
Really fantastic. You know, all rookies, I guess, or all people in the league, you know, want to get here eventually. And being a rookie and coming in your first year is, you know, just utterly fantabulous. You know, all the guys are excited, you know, and have been, and we just enjoyed ourselves.
Quarterback Terry Bradshaw was, of course, the major attraction, and the attention given him would continue as the week went on. The same was true for his Viking counterpart, Fran Tarkenton, who joked with cameramen while posing with Coach Bud Grant. The Vikings were a far less excited group at their photo day, held after the Steelers on Monday at the New Orleans Saints practice facility, which served as Minnesota's training site. The scene here is the Fontainebleau Hotel. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday mornings, the media members boarded the bus at the Marriott and came over here for a breakfast with Coach Chuck Noll at 9 a.m. That was followed at 9:45 a.m. by meetings with the Pittsburgh Steeler players. The Fontainebleau is the Steelers' hotel while in New Orleans. Since practice sessions were closed to the media, these hotel functions give reporters their major chance to talk to players and coaches. After a hearty breakfast, Steeler coach Chuck Noll took the stand. During the week, Noll displayed a good sense of humor, and in addition to football, reporters learned of his appreciation for fine wine and Baroque music. Super Bowl IX was Noll's first as a head coach. He noted that the press coverage and the press conferences stood out in his mind, but Noll would not let this coverage intimidate the Steelers. In fact, throughout the week, Noll stressed that he and his team were in New Orleans to enjoy Super Bowl week.
Really, it's a prescription for living. If you're going to be hang your head or be angry at everything that happens, of course you're not going to enjoy anything. I think the same thing holds true here. We came down here with the idea that this is the culmination of what we've worked for, and as a result we've got to enjoy the whole aspect of it, and I think our football team is.
You said in the press conference about the only thing would be good is if the media coverage could be kept to an hour a day, but your phone keeps ringing.
Well, that's true. We had phone calls from people all over the place, and we couldn't have a quarterback meeting. We had to break up and go to another room where I couldn't be found. So from those are the type of things that happen, but everybody's excited about it, and that's what makes it worthwhile.
After 45 minutes with Noll, reporters met with Steeler players. Players sat around a large round table where reporters gathered for 45 minutes of questions and interviews. Steeler players had these thoughts on the hoopla and the functions of Super Bowl week.
Well organized down here. You know, a lot of times when you're being interviewed, it's all day. People are calling on the telephone at night and so forth. But here you've got the hour in the morning. You get it over with, and then you got the rest of the day to concentrate on football and on the game.
Oh, I think there's too much made of it. I don't think there's any problem for a player that's been around for a while. We have a very loose football team, a relaxed football team, and we've been having some fun this week, and the news media has been very polite, and there hasn't been any problem in that regard, and I don't think that our emotional state will be any for the worse because of this week.
We've been pretty much free to do what we want to do in the city and around the hotel. And the only thing that's been bad about the whole deal is we've had a curfew every night at 11 o'clock, and we usually don't have this any time during the year except in training camp, and it's kind of hard for some guys to go to bed that early.
We were, of course, informed before we ever showed up in New Orleans to expect a hectic week, something like we'd never experienced before. And I'll be quite honest with you, it's nothing like what I was told it was going to be like. It hasn't been that at all. We're with the press 45 minutes a day, which is not a pressure situation whatsoever. They're not very forceful or belligerent people. It's very relaxing.
The scene shifted to Viking headquarters at the Hilton, where the same procedure was repeated. Each of the three sessions began with a luncheon and press conference with Bud Grant, who was questioned about the distractions of Super Bowl week.
Basically, we try to enjoy, this is a different atmosphere, and to a certain extent we can enjoy it. It's a little bit long. The routine is different. Other than avoiding some of the drinking water, I don't know anything that we're avoiding.
Like Chuck Noll, Bud Grant also revealed some of his outside interests during the week of questioning, including a love of duck hunting. Grant was asked if the players are affected by the Super Bowl hoopla.
Not really. We read about it, and we're kind of sheltered from it a little bit in that we have a job to do. Many people are down here to have a good time. Our good time will come after the game.
Minnesota player interviews were next, and the Vikings had these reactions to Super Bowl week.
It's really a new experience for me, and I never, coming from a small college, you never really face anything else. You might see one or two reporters, but to have a whole conference room full of people, asking you questions, and talking to you, it's really a new thing, and it's, in a way, it's really exciting, but in a way, again, it's kind of scary, because you really, sometimes you don't really know what to say,
We don't have a lot of time, really, to do a lot of socializing. A lot of people think we do, but we don't. And we just have a lot of time on our hands, and what we do is play cards, sit around, listen to music, or watch TV. So
I think it's the greatest sports week of the year. It's a tremendous promotion, a lot of interest in the game, a lot of build-up for the game, and the game itself has not been what we'd like it to be in the last 8 or 9, 9 Super Bowls, but I hope this year it might be, because I think a tremendous week.
Super Bowl week is far more than just press conferences with coaches and players. It's a very commercial and social week, a time when companies bring corporate executives together, a time for big business. All this was evident at the week's first major evening function, a Wednesday night dinner sponsored by Schick in order to announce the pairings for Thursday's 4th annual Schick Super Bowl week golf tournament held for the benefit of National Football League charities. 40 show business and sports celebrities like Fred McMurray, Ray Bolger, George Kirby, Johnny Bench, Joe Torre, and Dan Pastorini were on hand for the party, as were the 120 media members and businessmen with whom the celebrities would be teamed. In addition to the fine food, a Schick hot lather machine was presented to each dinner guest. On Thursday, the participants journeyed to the Lakeland Country Club for the tournament itself. Atlanta Falcon running back Ed Ray took celebrity honors with the 78. Thursday night, the golfers joined with the press for a cocktail party sponsored by Schick. At that time, Johnny Bench, who finished 3rd in the tournament with an 80, talked about his golf game.
With the wind and all the environmental things which seem to bother me, it's been a few places where Yule Gibbons goes, and I was deep in the woods a few times. There was no water, so I enjoyed most of the course today.
Other golfing celebrities had these comments on Super Bowl week.
If they've never been to the Mardi Gras here in New Orleans, come at Super Bowl week to get an idea of what the Mardi Gras would be like, because every hotel and motel room is taken, and spots in the park are taken too.
I think this is one of the great spectaculars that anybody connected with football, come down here. If they belong to one of the teams, the organization, they should come down here and just feel the vibration.
Being the scarecrow from the Wizard of Oz and finally getting a brain, I would say that anybody who has never been to a Super Bowl week in New Orleans would never know what life is all about.
Super Bowl week activities continued on Thursday afternoon as reporters visited the New Orleans Superdome. The immense structure is 95% complete and is scheduled to open on May 1st. Reporters were shown the Superdome's interior and were told of some of its many features. As the week progressed, the number of out-of-town journalists grew, as did discussions on angles for stories and predictions for the game. Media members were constantly kept up to date on the team's practices, the daily weather forecast, and the condition of Dwight White. Videotaped interviews with players and coaches are played back in the press lounge, and quotes are frequently read over the press room PA. While all this is going on, NBC Television's 180 production people are busily preparing for their role in the Super Bowl, the telecast of Sunday's game to over 70 million Americans. Kurt Gowdy arrived on the scene Monday and talked of his week of meetings and preparation.
So I like to get my work done in my own mind. I feel much more at ease and more at rest that my work's behind me, and now I'm caught up in all of the things that go with the ball game itself, the preparation of the meetings and those kind of the complex things. But my work's basically done earlier in the week.
NBC's Director of Sports Publicity, Till Ferdenzi, describes the production for the Super Bowl.
Without question, this undertaking is probably the most expensive production type undertaking that NBC Sports does. There are tapings, there are different crews for pre-game shows, post-game shows, the show that goes on the air. There's an interchange of equipment. It would be interesting for you then to know that there's 3.5 miles of audio cable out at that ballpark, some 2.5 miles of video cable.
Super Bowl week also provides NBC with the chance to entertain sponsors and company executives who come to New Orleans. There are dinner and cocktail parties during the week, plus a hospitality tent set up after Sunday's game. On Friday morning, Bud Grant arrived at the Marriott for his final pregame meeting with reporters. With the Lombardi Trophy sitting to his right, Grant was asked about the advantages gained by previous Super Bowl experiences.
Quite possibly the only advantage we would have is making use of the dead time. They've been here before. They know what the time is, and I think they've been able to utilize their time and not go a little bit stir-crazy, try to make up things to do. They seem to be very relaxed and enjoying themselves.
The extra time, the week away from home, and the large press sessions with often the same questions repeated are among the major distractions for players at Super Bowl time. At his Friday press conference, Chuck Noll was asked how the Steelers have reacted to the week.
It ends up being a very long week. Having to come in here Sunday, it gets to be a little long staying in that hotel room all that time. I think we probably could come down on a Tuesday and get the same thing done that was done this week. But I think for the most part, our football team reacted and responded very well.
The players' wives arrived Friday, and both coaches gave their teams Friday night and Saturday afternoon off for a final pregame visit to the French Quarter or to one of the local eating establishments. The Super Bowl is sponsored by the entire sport of pro football, with owners and representatives from all 26 NFL teams on the scene. Among those arriving late in the week was Steeler owner Art Rooney, who drew big crowds in his initial appearance in the press room on Friday. Because of Rooney's 42 years without a winner, the Steelers were the sentimental favorites for Super Bowl IX. He told us what it was like to be part of Super Bowl week.
It's hard to just compare it. I think it's one of the finest classics of any sporting event that I know. It's fantastic. And, of course, being part of it now that you're in the limelight like I am, it's something hard to, like I never realized what it was until now that I'm in it myself, and there's nothing I know that has ever compared with it.
On Friday afternoon, NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle held the day's final press conference. As expected, the cap case, the Rozelle rule, and other legal items were topics of most of the questions. Friday also marks one of the biggest social functions of Super Bowl week, which Rozelle describes.
We have a number of social functions, including the little party that we put on Friday night before every Super Bowl game, and there we entertain the media, the network people, their sponsors, just the friends who support us throughout the year. And that usually has over 2,000 people.
The Mardi Gras for Super Bowl IX, as it is called, is held in an enormous room, well decorated with Mardi Gras figures, balloons, and helmets and posters from all 26 NFL teams. The evening features dancing, cocktails, and a buffet dinner for the NFL guests. Throughout the affair, there's also plenty of music, New Orleans style. By Friday night, the Super Bowl had taken over the newspaper headlines in the streets of New Orleans. Estimates are that the week pumped between $15 and $20 million into the city's economy, another major facet of Super Bowl week. By Saturday afternoon, the press conferences were all over, and fans from Minnesota, Pittsburgh, and around the country were descending on New Orleans, and Super Bowl fever had set in, too. Pete Rozelle had this description of the scene.
I think in New Orleans it's a little more unique perhaps than in other cities because New Orleans is so compact. It's fascinating just to walk around the French Quarter, and you'll just run into people from all over the country you know that you wouldn't ordinarily see. There's obviously great excitement. There's the color of the fans of the two teams.
Almost three-fourths of the thousands of out-of-town fans arrived in New Orleans via ground transportation. Joining the fans on the streets of the French Quarter were celebrities like Don Meredith, Joe Namath, Hot Rod Hundley, Reggie Jackson, Jack Whitaker, Archie Manning, Robert Goulet, plus dozens of other stars from the sports and entertainment fields. Corporate executives were present and partying continued. While the fans were swarming the streets, many of the media people spent Saturday at the racetrack viewing the $25,000 Super Bowl sweepstakes. Others attended a press briefing and party held by the NFL Players Association, and a few journeyed to Mobile for the Senior Bowl. It had been a long week of activity for members of the press, and several of them talked with us about the activities and functions of writers at Super Bowl week.
Well, the press's function is to reflect what's going on as best it can, to try to catch the flavor of something that's now a bizarre Americana, the Super Bowl. The Kentucky Derby, the Indianapolis 500, it's an event, a false, fake event occasion.
Is that good or bad?
It's good because it's relief from the other facets of life, which are getting worse and worse, apparently.
Say they look for hookers a lot, and they drink, of course, and there's quite a lot of gambling, card playing, betting, and irresponsible behavior, I would say.
How much?
Of course, I never do any of that myself, but I've heard of it. I really have.
Oh, and how much did you lose this week in terms of poker?
I won $89 in poker, and I won a little bit on the game, but I had my wallet ripped off, so it came out a wash.
And I think it's given what it's worth from the point of view of the interest that fans have in professional football. It's been building up to the championship game all season. It's a fun thing. It's harmless. Nothing wrong with it. To give some people a few chuckles, that's fine.
By Saturday evening, the Press Hospitality Lounge, like every place in New Orleans, was bustling with activity and anticipation. The Press Lounge was the center for conversation and liquid refreshments throughout the week, and talk of the game was building. Meanwhile, Steeler fans were holding their own rally with the help of Bobby Lane and John Henry Johnson at a New Orleans hotel, and the crowds on Bourbon Street were growing.
It's now Saturday night on Bourbon Street. Super Bowl IX is about 16 hours away, and Super Bowl fever has totally erupted.
We're number one! We're number one! We're number one!
How do you feel about the fun you're having? I think it's great. It's a good time, beautiful time, and the Vikings are going to win tomorrow.
Beautiful. Everybody's having a good time.
Wild. It's like State Fair Day.
What do you think about the Vikings? They going to win or what?
It's just wonderful. And we're having a wonderful time. I don't believe all these people.
And how do you feel about the Steelers in general? I guess you feel pretty good, huh?
Hey, the Super Steelers all the way. Number one!
What about you?
What? Fantastic, and New Orleans is out of this world.
Good place to hold the Super Bowl, huh?
Absolutely, the people are fantastic. Really good.
We're coming down whether the Steelers are in it or not. We like the action.
Roses are red, violets are blue. Vikings try hard, but they're still number 2.
And I just can't believe this is really happening.
Okay.
And tomorrow, the Steelers are going all the way, Jack. They're going to go all the way. I'm telling you.
So the stage is set after an incredible week of celebration, press conferences, and just about everything imaginable. The fans have had their say. The players have had their say. Everybody's had their say. And Super Sunday, January 12th, 1975, is ready to begin.
Super Sunday began with still another meal for the press, an NFL-sponsored brunch at the Marriott. From there, reporters were bused to Tulane Stadium, where they settled in the main and auxiliary press sections. TV monitors were stationed throughout the press area for the journalists' convenience. Despite the cold, damp weather, the enthusiasm of the fans was high. After a Saturday night on Bourbon Street spent singing Dixie, catching dollar bills thrown from a terrace, and drinking a new concoction, the Steelers Sunrise, fans prepared for the real climax of the week, the game itself. When the Steelers and Vikings emerged for pregame warm-ups, the noise, which would continue throughout the day, began.
There are some people that thought that Super Bowl IX itself might be overshadowed by the hoopla of Super Bowl week, but no way. We saw it in the excitement on Bourbon Street last night. We saw it in the tenseness in the faces of the people in the hotel this morning. And certainly we feel it right out here at Tulane Stadium today. Super Bowl IX is now ready to begin.
The 1975 Super Bowl began as a defensive struggle. Thanks to the first safety in Super Bowl history, the Steelers took a 2-0 lead into the locker room at halftime. While reporters were served lunch in small Super Bowl souvenir cases, the NFL was presenting a fine halftime show filled with the pageantry typical of Super Bowl week. In the second half, while the Steeler defense continued to harass Fran Tarkenton, Terry Bradshaw and Franco Harris sparked the Steeler offense. Harris's 158 yards and 34 carries were among 13 Super Bowl records set, as was the brilliant Steeler defensive effort, holding Minnesota to just 17 yards rushing, 119 total, in capturing Super Bowl IX, 16-6. Many reporters left the stands early to journey to the Steeler locker room for the trophy presentation. Others went to an adjacent tent set up for press interviews. The Steelers, determined to enjoy Super Bowl week, certainly enjoyed Super Bowl day. The much-maligned Terry Bradshaw had silenced his critics, but, as he stated, winning the game for Art Rooney was the biggest thrill of all. For one final time, the Marriott press room was busy with activity as reporters wrote their game stories. The NFL eased the task by handing out player and coaches' quotes and by hosting one final buffet dinner. Super Bowl week was now complete. How do you summarize this annual unparalleled week of festivity? It's 50,000 out-of-towners, sold-out hotels, Bourbon Street, and the New Orleans restaurants. Super Bowl week is big business, parties, press conferences, celebrities, a big football game, plus much more.
It's a major emotional release for a lot of people in our country. I think that if we tend to just let the negative stories we read on the front pages, or we see on the television news or hear on radio, the negative things we read on the business page just dominate our thinking, our international and domestic problems dominate our thinking 24 hours a day, or at least our waking hours, we'd be a very morbid people. We have to have some escapism. And I think that the Super Bowl is just major escapism, and I think it's healthy.
Every country needs a folk myth. We came along a little too late for Beowulf, and we don't have that much tradition behind us. And if a guy is willing to spend the money he has to spend in Super Bowl week, and he's willing to take the head that he has to live with afterwards, I don't think anybody really gets hurt. It probably helps somebody's economy and takes everybody's mind off everything. The only thing I would hope that if we do have a serious crisis, it would be nice if it doesn't happen on Super Sunday, because we won't know about it till Monday afternoon.
I describe it as very exciting. I think part of the scene we should capture at a Super Bowl game is the lifestyle of the people that come here, the parties, the happenings, the dress of the women, the celebrities that are here. All that is part of the trapping of a World Series or a Super Bowl game, and that's what makes it a real happening in America once a year.
Well, it's a way to let off steam, and there are people that are devoted fans of their respective teams, and all the sports enthusiasts come here, and the crowd that likes athletics is a very outgoing, gregarious, extrovert crowd, and you have a ball. It's really fun. It's sort of a way to get away from it all.
Super Bowl week 1975 is now history. The Pittsburgh Steelers are Super Bowl champions, but as we've tried to be pointing out in these last few minutes to you, Super Bowl week is much more than just this game. It's something to the writers, it's something to NBC, it's something to the NFL. It's a commercial product, it's a time for hoopla, it's a time for enjoyment for the fans. Super Bowl week is a good number of things. Most important, it's an integral part of American culture and one of the big events in American sports every single year. We hope we've added some insight into your views of the Super Bowl and Super Bowl week. Jim Miller, thank you for joining us.